What's happening, people? How we doing? Good to see you again, man. Okay, I bet you're sick of seeing my face, huh? Bit egotistical coming from me. But no, on a serious note, however, I'm doing alright, innit? You might have seen me on STV. I'd hope you would have, because I shared the clips to this channel on top of it. And of course, I done a podcast with the Governor of Barlinnie on the BBC, which is a sentence I never thought I'd see myself say. Mick Stoney, to his credit, a really nice guy, and it's strange, see, coming from the perspective of being a prisoner. I knew Mick Stoney from Barlinnie, no personally, but you're aware of who the jail governor is when you're in the jail. And there was always that thing where you think there's them and us, and that kind of, it almost becomes like a survival instinct, because when you're in a jail, it's like a trust thing. You're like, I can't trust them with X, Y, and Z because it's them and us. Like, I've got my people and they've got their people. But I've spoken about at large quite recently about my time in prison, mostly for the fact is people are curious to hear my opinion on things. That's just the way it's been, so I'll continue to voice them. Whilst it's in the mainstream media, I'll voice my opinion on the subject. Having that opportunity to do that podcast with Mick Stoney, it was a crazy experience. I can't really say anything otherwise, because the two of us would never really cross paths unless the theme is prison. I was invited on by the BBC to talk about HMP Glasgow and a couple of other subjects revolving around the justice system. With HMP Glasgow, it's stretching into nearly £1 billion for the budget. Of course, I said in STV how I think that it's going to exceed that budget. I know construction. You don't need to be a high up in construction to know that one, deadlines are overrun, as well as budgets. It's part and parcel of construction. That's why when you look at all these new builds that are getting flung up, and there's so many different problems with them, because people are getting them up as quick as they can to turn a profit. Because the longer past a project's deadline a project extends, there's less profit. There's profit to our people. It's essentially what it is. You don't need to be a brain box to know that. You could be a labourer on a building site and know it's human error that's involved. We're not relying on machines that operate to certain mechanisms that you can attune it to, where it will complete things by a certain time. Humans get tired. Humans can be lazy. Plus as well, there's a lot of things you can't really account for that go right. Materials not turning up. One phase of the job not getting completed. One thing can offset it and drag that on, thus increasing the price. I voiced that similar concern to Mick Stoney, and what he says, he's very, very much involved in the design of the new Barlinnie. And what he says is that the way it has been designed will ensure there's a decrease in staffing costs. And I think that's quite an ambitious thing to say, but I can understand why he's saying that, because the way they've designed it, anybody that's been in this jail, and probably some of you have that watch my channel, would have liked to see a Barlinnie. And if anybody doesn't know, you can imagine, see Barlinnie, it's, you walk into the bottom flat and you can see right up to the top flat. There's one hot plate to serve the full building. So the first flat need to come down and get fed, the second flat, third flat, or that. The showers at the end of the section, you need to get opened up to get a shower. You get a shower like every 2 days. So a lot of the functionality of the hall is down to eating and cleaning. Whereas you've got these new modern jails, they're all separate landings. So they've got separate staff and they've got separate hot plates. So I can see how that would materialise, how that would work, with a lot less time spent on the feeding and the showers in the cells, That's a massive contributor. So I'm hopeful that it does come to fruition. I do really want to believe them, and I don't for a second think anybody's lying. I just think I'm probably been a pessimist with these things. Maybe it's a new approach. When I was in Barlinnie, there was a place called the Resource Hub, and that was really progressive in its attitude and its approach to things, where they were actually, right, they took the prisoners and they were like, right, how can we work with you? How can we ensure you get what you need to get here to sustain your freedom in the community? And they've of course opened up the Wellbeing Hub, where they will focus more on kind of like maybe guitar classes. They've been doing like rap workshops in there, like meditation, stuff like that. Essentially well-being. But the thing is, you like your Mick Stoney and your people that have got this kind of progressive mindset, they're almost arrested by the court of public opinion. Because as much as they want to try and take strides forward in order to try a new approach in rehabilitation, they need to be small strides, because if they're seen in the public eye, and trust me, it always gets out, the papers get wind of it, everybody knows. If that gets out that they're maybe coming across as too soft, too lenient, you know what I mean? It's your belongings in a bonfire, essentially, that's what it is. And people always have got this argument, jail's meant to be tough. Fair dues. It's a place of detention. Jail's tough before you even get there. But the biggest thing is the removal of your liberty. That is the utmost aspect of the punishment, is for a period of time you will not be at liberty. You will not have access to freedom like regular people. You broke the law, fair dues. That's on the agreement. That's the trade-off. You know what I mean? You did a crime, did a time. Can't argue with that. But a lot of people are kind of that mindset. Bread and water. Lock them up 24 hours a day. Cage them. There's a good few things wrong with that. I always point back to the example. If we're talking about harsh punishment, right? It was less than 100 years ago where for the crime of murder, you would be hung. You'd be executed. Capital punishment, they called it. No long before that, though, you were able to get hung for a lot more pettier crimes. A couple of 100 years ago, if you were a thief, you'd get hung. They had an all manner of disposals. The one more brutal than the next. Putting gallows and publicly shamed, outcast. And back in the days, being outcast was to mean certain death, because no for long you could survive on your own. And I think psychology tells us, see that fear of no being accepted by your fellows, by your peers, that stems from the days where we existed in tribes. And in those days, to be outcast and not accepted by your fellows or peers meant death. The consequences aren't as severe, but it's still embedded in their psyche. But I go back to the punishment aspect of it, right? At one point, we probably had the most horrific punishments available for pretty much all crime. What did that do for reoffending rates? Can you guess? It's pretty obvious. They increased. People still kept breaking the law. Didn't it work? The Bridewells was one of the first steps towards creating a prison system, and the Bridewells were modelled in a London type jail, where basically Bridewells is where manual labour was enforced. They were going to work it out of you. The thing is with the bridewells, they served a function until they stopped serving a function, where they started to become overcrowded. So with that, the bridewells ceased to be of use. So they built Scotland's first national jail, and it was the General Prison at Perth. And in there, solitary confinement was enforced. But people were starting to develop psychological issues via solitary confinement. And lo and behold, guess what? Reoffending rates kept going up. Then eventually, that became overcrowded. What came next? HMP Barlinnie. That was built to solve the overcrowding issues, for a jail that was built to solve overcrowding issues. And now what's happening in Barlinnie? You've got 1,400 prisoners in a jail that was designed for 1,000. And this HMP Glasgow is designed to hold a capacity of around 1,350, roughly. And of course, there's going to be like a little bit of breathing space there, just in case they do go over capacity. And they will. If you just look at the likes of right now, if you were to transfer everybody in Barlinnie to HMP Glasgow, it'd be stretched to capacity. So what solution have the Scottish Government brought in? Well, they're releasing people 40% into a sentence rather than 50%, an early release scheme. And of course, they're not allowing people that are convicted of sexual offences and domestics. Fair enough, I wouldn't argue with that. But what is it really doing? Aye, it's a short-term solution. It's taking this overcrowding problem, which is causing a lot of issues with managing the jail efficiently for Mick Stoney and the SPS. But what is happening with these guys that are getting released? I was speaking to Francis for the streets. Shout out Francis. He told me he was speaking to a guy in the street who had been released as part of the early release scheme. And the guy had been released onto the street. He didn't have any fixed accommodation. He went to the housing, and because he'd been in jail, he was deemed voluntary homeless. So he was no a priority. I don't know how these things work. If that is the case, I think that's pretty messed up. But of course, I'd be open to hearing more information about that. Regardless, the guy's on the street, and he's got nowhere to go. Except back to the jail. Because see, if I was on the street, and God bless you that I've never been in that situation, and I hope it never happens to me, the thought of a prison cell would be pretty inviting. Because you've got all your immediate needs met. You've got a roof over your head. You've got heating when it works. You've got a shower every second day. You've got food. You've got all these things that you've not got in the street. It'd be probably an easy decision to make for a lot of people. And I think this is the decision this guy was planning on making. Because when you're forced into a desperate situation in desperate circumstances, something that seems ludicrous to you and I who are in that position seems like the only way out. But what crime does somebody need to commit to go to jail? Did they steal? Did they attack somebody? Who knows? That's the thing. What is that doing for reoffending rates? What is that doing for this person? And he's the only one. And it's not just that as well. See, the thing is, right, I'm going to use an analogy here. For those of you who were maybe born in the 90s, you'll probably get this more if we've got some millennials or Gen Zs, right? You ever remember, like, you have a telly? Got a telly, right? One day the telly doesn't work. Whatever reason, it's just not turning on. What's the first thing you usually do? Me, the number one trick to solve any technological issue, turn it off and on again. At the wall, switch on, switch off, plug in, plug out, try it. Sometimes it works. If it doesn't work, what's the next step? I might get a wee bang. You ever went like, boof, just get that wee scalp on the side of it, and it switches back on. You ever done that with a telly? Sometimes it works. You try that bit, and it doesn't work. What do you do next? Me, I'm pretty stumped. I have stretched my expertise with televisions to its limit. I must accept I don't know how to solve this issue. So, I would usually seek out the advice of somebody that knows something about tellies. Or would I, instead of smacking it once, would I pick up a hammer and scalp the telly? Do you think hitting it harder would maybe make it work? No, that would be absurd. You see, this is kind of similar to how the justice system works, right? If I go into court done with an assault, maybe get a fine, depending on the severity of it, community service fine, very rarely I'll go to jail. See, I come back, charged with another assault, in a short space of time. The punishment will be far more severe. Might teeter on the brink of jail, but maybe scrape by with the skin of my teeth with a fine and community service. Obviously, a bit more than I got the first time. See, I get done with an assault the third time. Right, quite likely I'm going to jail. Fast forward, and I go into court, and I've got 10 assault convictions, right? I'm going to jail for probably the longest I've ever been in jail for. The justice system is accepted that I'm just not getting it. So, they're just going to send me to jail for longer. This is the thing, right? See, the justice system, they try a method here by sending me to jail in order to rehabilitate me, so whatever program or process is implemented ensures that I get the message. I need to stop doing this. So see, when I keep coming back after committing the same crime there and there again, why does the justice system know, instead of looking at me as if, what's the matter with you? Why don't you get this? Why don't they look at it and go, what are we doing wrong? Is there something maybe up with the jail? Maybe the jail isn't working. Maybe it's us that's the problem. Maybe we need to try something different. But they don't do that. They look at the individual and they go, right, multiple convictions. See you later, mate. That bin is get flung out the back. That telly's get flung in the bin. And I'm not saying if somebody's been done with 10 assault convictions, they can't go to jail. If you're assaulting people repeatedly, then you kind of need to accept that that's part of the consequences, whether you want to or not. But the thing is, why don't we look at these repeat offenders and say, what is it that's going on here? Why don't they investigate it? Like my TV, if my telly isn't working after pulling the plug out and giving it a wee scalp, I'm going to ask, right, what am I doing wrong? I clearly don't have the answer here. Because if I did, it would have worked. So I'm going to need to get somebody else to provide me with a solution. I don't go like that. No, what? This telly's the problem. It's like a plant. I heard an analogy, right? It's like a plant, right? Listen to me. See, if you had a plant in your house, right, and you stuck it in a wee dark corner, you never fed it, you never watered it, the plant would surely die, wouldn't you? Would you point at that plant and go like that? You're just not getting it, are you? You're making the wrong lifestyle choices here. You know what? I'm just going to fling you the cupboard. No, you wouldn't. You would feed the plant. You'd probably talk nicely. You'd put it out the window where there's a bit of sunlight in it. You would change your tactics. The justice system has few tactics at its deployment. If you look at drug addiction, you've got a DTTO, a drug treatment and testing order. These were brought in the 90s to combat the rise in crime. After the back of the heroin epidemics, a lot of people were committing crime to sustain and supplement a drug habit. I think it was brought in Glasgow and Fife, which had the highest rates. I think there might have been 40 odd in Glasgow, 40 odd in Fife. Oh, and there was about 90 odd people, right? And they stabilised these people, and the plan was to stop them from committing further crime by offering a kind of monitoring service. See, the thing is, but all of these people were on methadone. So, a drug treatment order is giving somebody drugs to keep them away from drugs. It's just bonkers. And you need to ask yourself, right, where are the people to take accountability for this? Because we're blaming the people that are dying of drug overdoses. We're blaming people that are going to jail repeatedly. I may be sympathetic because I've been in that position before, but I would say I'm more empathetic. I think the problem here is that there's a disconnect between the people who are tasked with solving the problem and the people who are suffering as a result of their inadequacy. I'm not saying it's an easy solution. It's going to take a lot of forward thinking. It may take a bit of trial and error. But it's such a tricky thing. Like the justice system and punishment and crime. Because taking a more analytical approach of somebody's offending behaviour and looking for ways and means for them to desist from that offending behaviour that doesn't involve a longer sentence isn't a vote winner. Because the people want to hear the most dangerous in society will go to jail and will go to jail for longer. So you don't need to live in society with them. You're protected, you're safe. But why do people not feel safe in society? And we can look at crime rates as such. We can look at areas we grew up in, especially. You've got people that live in working class areas that see the devastation drugs can cause, poverty can cause. There's a lot of crime in the areas. Then you've got people that stay in more wealthy and middle class areas. They're more scared of somebody taking what they've got. And maybe the stories they've heard. Because if you've grown up in somewhere like Newton Mearns and you've never been to a place like post Lord Govan, or you've maybe passed through it as like a safari or some kind of thing like that, it's almost like the lair of the boogeyman. That's kind of how you view it. But the thing is, a lot of these people, your judges, your politicians as such, they view our communities as safaris. It's like a zoo. You pass through it, you'll have a wee look and you'll see, but you'll not get out the motor. Make sure your doors are locked and your possessions are close to you, because these people will steal and rob for you. But see, when you live in these communities and you know people, and for lack of a better description, I'll use it, some of the worst of the worst. And there's certain people that commit certain crimes that I've got no affinity for. I'm not at that stage in my development yet. Will I get there? I don't know. I think we know these types of crimes. I think it's quite universal that a lot of people share a similar stance on certain types of offences. I'm not talking about these people. I'm talking about the career shoplifter, the people that are out doing turns, even the people that are punting. I've known a lot of people that have sold drugs in my time. I only know a couple that have done it for the status. Most people I knew done it out of survival, out of necessity. The amount of people that have done that, because see in your scheme, my scheme, the biggest role models, right, I've said this time and time again, so apologies if you've heard it before, the biggest role models you've got is the person that sells the most drugs in the area and the person that's the biggest psychopath. Because when you're growing up in an area where poverty is quite rife, there's not a lot of employment opportunities, addiction is commonplace. For me, I had two of my biggest worries in life was my financial security and my emotional security. Financial, quite obvious. My mum was a single parent. There wasn't a lot of money in the household. I always had my needs met, but I was always aware that money was an issue. And there was that way, there was an anxiety of, is there going to be money? And it's no money so I can sit and get an amazing Christmas. It's just sometimes you worry, like, I've got to get papped at this house. Eventually it did happen, but I'm not going to go into that. And your emotional security. When you're growing up in an area where violence is quite commonplace, I grew up when it was like all the gang fighting days as such, and there was that worry, right? Am I going to get done in here? And I was obviously flirting with like the kind of quote-unquote gang violence as such. So I did put myself in certain circumstances, but the thing is, when you're growing up in an environment with that, you naturally flock to other people that are experiencing the same emotions. And that's where you find your tribe, you find your community. A few hundred years ago, we would have been in clans as such. We're just modern day clansmen. But the thing is, right, see, there's some people that would look on somebody selling drugs or somebody carrying knives with disdain and disgust and contempt. And listen, by the way, people are entitled to that. I can understand that there's devastation that is wreaked and caused by drugs and violence. I'm not excusing it. I've been involved in both sides of that trade and both ends of it. So I'm by no means a hypocrite, but I can understand that. But see, the thing is, when I carried a knife, I didn't carry a knife thinking what some guy in the West End thought of me. How I was a scumbag and whatever. I carried a knife because it was a good opportunity. There was good reason that it was possible I could have got murdered in like a street outside my house. That's just the reality of it. And listen, I've been in amongst murderers, and I know it doesn't take much. You just need to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. The thing is as well, I could have been one. I was very, very lucky when I went to prison, and as much as it was a terrible situation, I can't take it back, but we must accept there was a certain element of luck involved there. It nearly took a guy's life. So, am I proud of it? No, I'm not. And I feel at this stage in my life, I'm doing the necessary work in order to try and amend my behaviour, and I've came a long way for the person I used to be. Now I'm finding myself in a position where a lot more people are turning to me for my opinion on like issues in the justice system. And listen, I'm happy to speak. I'm happy to voice my concerns and share it. But for me, do I have a solution that's going to solve the reoffending issues, going to solve overcrowding issues? I've got part of a solution, right? And the jail's full of a wide range of diverse people, right? You've got people in for violent crimes, sexual crimes, you get people in for drug offences, and they can range from possession or distribution. You've got fraud, you've got all that. So for me, in Barlinnie, for what I remember, a massive, massive percentage of the population were people that were serving sentences that was a result of them pursuing and trying to fund a drug habit. And that could involve like shoplifting, theft, possession of drugs, maybe even trying to sell drugs. Just whatever they were doing was contributing to acquiring drugs to sustain a drug addiction. See, when these people go to jail, and see some of them that have been shoplifters for like 30 years, they get done with a petty crime like shoplifting and they can get like 2 years. That's that telly getting scalped with a hammer. Because what happens when they go into prison? They're usually heroin addicts. What did they give them? Methadone. Or you get that Buvidal jag it's going about now. I don't know how many people in the jail are on it. I've heard it's a better alternative to methadone, but as far as I remember, methadone was massive. See, methadone, when it get first brought about, the idea was to take away that necessity for heroin addicts to be constantly chasing heroin. Because the idea was it would take away the craving, it would take away the rattle, and it would sustain their drug habit so they could lead a more manageable, balanced life. See, the majority, if not all, methadone users Methadone isn't the only drug they take. They do what's called polydrug use, and that's like when you're using a cocktail of substances. Nearly all of the drug deaths in Scotland were a result of polydrug use. A large percentage of them were using methadone. So what solution is that? Where you're bringing in, that's the best you can do, is give somebody a drug that isn't as bad as the drug they're on, but it isn't enough to get them clean. I know of nobody that got clean for methadone. It's an oxymoron. It's impossible. You can't get clean using methadone. You need to get clean by stopping taking drugs. But if you're an addict and you take away the drugs and the alcohol, you're suddenly returned to what you were trying to escape with, drugs and alcohol. So, pardon me, if you're white knuckling it, as they say, and you return to that state of mind, and you've not got the support system in place to help you navigate and understand and work through this past trauma or these experiences you went through, you're going to relapse. Just a matter of time. But if you do it in the eyes of the system, it's, well, we give you a chance. Look what you've done with it. It's back on them. There's almost like an institutional arrogance with the system in these circumstances. It's almost as, oh, well, we tried. Like, you try once and then you give up. It goes back to the telly analogy. I try to get it working and I give up. I can understand if you're trying to a certain point and that telly's just no turning on. What do you do? If you've consulted experts, you took it to a show, it's just no working, you would probably accept that that telly is damaged beyond repair. There's nothing else you can do for it, apart from to discard it. And that's what we do with the most troubled members of society. And there's a really commonly used term in Glasgow, Scotland, and it's junkie. And the definition, junkie comes from the word junk. And the definition of junk is old and discarded, of no use. And that's what we say about the most damaged people in society. And then you wonder how they don't get better. I think that kind of stretches and applies to a lot of people in the prison system. And there might be people watching this going, boo-hoo. Do the crime, do the time. I'm not saying take people out of jail. I'm just saying maybe change what you do in the jail with them. And not trying this pure elastoplast approach. This cream and a plaster and a wee pat in the bum, like on you go, and seeing if that works. Actually trying to dig deep and delve, because see if you give somebody an audience to listen, they'll speak, but the power of listening is done in listening. And I know you're going to say, oh, you need bother, mate. True wisdom there, get that up next to the live, laugh, love. See, the thing about listening, it's much bigger than that. Sometimes listening is just allowing somebody to be heard. Because some people just need to vent. Especially in the jail, trust me, I've been there, I've seen them vent when they get that chance. There's a lot of pent up aggression and frustration there. When that's pent up and then you're dealing with screws that are giving you a hard time, you've got somebody in exercise here trying to get wide, you've got people with the windies. It's just like it's like a pot. You ever left a pot boiling and then forgot to turn it down and it just, it blows over? That's essentially what your emotions are like in the jail. I was lucky in my last sentence. Between my second last sentence and my last sentence, I'd started doing meditation, like Wim Hof breathing, and Wim Hof breathing is really good for like kind of stress release. And I noticed, like, when I was doing this, it made things so much more bearable and easier. I actually done it with my co-pilot, a guy, he was on his spice and everything, man. I was getting it with Wim Hof breathing and that, and he was like that, because he was raging about something. So I says, try this, and I talked him through it. He kind of half-arsed it, because I was like, right, shut your eyes and lie back, and he just sort of and stared at us. And I go to my date, and he's like, after he's like, I forgot what I was raising about. Getting people to meditate, though, it's like, it takes a bit of time. You know what I mean? For a lot of people, it's uncomfortable. See, these things, I just naturally orientated towards them, man. I've got no shame, and I'm so glad for it. But aye, the position I find myself in now, all these media outlets, they want to ask me my opinion. Keep asking. I'll keep talking, man. And I'll use my experiences to try and empower my present. And I think that's important. I've spoken about it previously. It's like using your past experiences in a positive light. Suddenly, the experience becomes meaningful. So if I can find myself in a position where I can use what I've been through, where I've been, to try and change or help, or just make a difference, you can bet I'm going to do it, and I don't care what anybody else is going to say about it. So aye, label me as that guy that's always talking about the jail, because, don't get me wrong, it's quite an interesting topic, isn't it? Well, I hope you found it interesting, but I'm going to leave yous be. I'm going to go and have some crisps, eat some Maltesers, and I'm not going to feel the slight bit guilty about doing it. Should have said slightest there, but it's been a day, and a beautiful one at that. Pleasure as always, people. Like, subscribe, and don't get wide. Catches!